Hi y'all, I'm going to make this vid about my grandmother and a couple of things I found out about her on Ancestry.com. And yes, Ancestry.com has been a bit of a controversy regarding the DNA and that they can sell it. That's a whole other video. I'm not getting into this now. This is about my grandmother. And the website and the DNA did help me find out her story, so I had a positive experience. Let's put it that way. So this is Kay. Everybody say hi to Kay. This is her, my grandmother in 1952. And one of the reasons I actually got started on Ancestry.com was to find out more about Kay's family. The only thing I knew was what she had told me later in her life. And unfortunately, my grandmother had dementia later in life, and every time I asked her or went to go write down details, the story changed, and changed significantly. Dates and times and order of things were mixed up, and I just attributed it to the dementia. But I found out that no, her kids had the same thing all their lives. Every time she talked about her family, the story changed. So what I knew was that on her birth certificate, her parents are listed as Ruth and Thomas, and that she did not know that until later in life. She grew up thinking that Ruth, this is Ruth, this is Kay's mom, Ruth, and a doctor named John. This was who Kay thought was her father. And it turned out no, he was her adopted father. Now, whether or not he ever actually married, if Dr. John actually married Ruth, or whether he actually officially adopted Kay, she didn't seem to know. She didn't really want to know. She said there was a big scandal or a big secret and something was like very bad, not good, and she just was like not going to ask any questions. She didn't want to know. Let sleeping dogs lie. And of course, that was back in the 40s and 50s, and they were a very Irish Catholic family. So I kind of took her word for it. We all kind of assumed she was illegitimate. So I get on to Ancestry. Oh, and she had also told me that she thought her birth father may have been in the Navy and may have died before she was born, but that sounded like kind of like a fable story to her. So fast forward a few years, I'm on Ancestry and I type in Ruth's name, and I find a marriage certificate between Ruth and Thomas. And I'm like, oh, hey, Ruth and Thomas were married. That's really weird. I wonder then if the story was true and he died before, either before my grandmother was born or when she was really young or something happened. And then I found out a really weird thing. I couldn't find a marriage certificate between Ruth and John. And she was definitely his wife, or living as his wife. And I thought, oh, well, that must be the scandal. She ditched the big Irish Catholic family for the, 6'2", blonde haired, blue eyed German doctor. Go Grandma Ruth. And that's kind of where it's been. Thomas, I kind of tracked down, but it didn't make any sense. For one thing, Thomas didn't die until 1960, which, okay, then maybe it's just, that his wife ran off, and maybe that was the big secret. And from his family, I found up to his grandparents, and there I kind of stopped because I wasn't really sure that I had the right Thomas. So, Mom and I took a DNA test through Ancestry.com. And we got matches. And we got matches for a Patrick. That was our common ancestor, was Patrick. And Patrick is Thomas's grandfather. So to kind of put this a little bit in perspective, was that Ruth married Thomas in 1911. And that Thomas, I traced back, and I thought I had him in 1900 on Wiley Street, according to the census. And if that was correct, that family there is descended from Patrick. So when the DNA results came back and said you are matching DNA is matching you to these other Ancestry customers, and these other Ancestry customers are descended from Patrick, that told me this Thomas on Wiley Street in the 1900 census is in fact the Thomas I was looking for. So I went, yay, and I started filling in the family tree. And I found out that Thomas, the next census we have for that family, in 1910 is on Wild Street. I'm sorry if you're from Pittsburgh. I have no idea what your names are called. And like I said, he marries Ruth in 1911. Kay was born in 1917. And on Thomas's draft card in 1918, Ruth is listed as his wife. No big deal. And in the 1920 census, he's living with Ruth and Kay as his daughter. And in the 1930 census, Ruth is suddenly listed as Lang, which is Dr. John's last name. I shouldn't put that out there, but oh well. Is living with Dr. John, and Kay is listed as Dr. John's daughter. So, but then I noticed something really weird. Again, this family that I've been tracking is also in the 1920 census. And in the 1920 census, Thomas is listed there, living with them. But he is also listed as living with Ruth. And as I said, there are several. It's a common name. This piece here was why I wasn't really sure that I had found the right Thomas. But I have to be, because again, this family that he's listed at home is the one that is tracked from Patrick, and Patrick is the one that we share DNA with a whole bunch of other people. So Thomas had 2 residences in 1920, which was really weird. And then it got weirder. In 1911, when Ruth and Thomas got married, they got married in West Virginia. And that was odd to me because they both live in Pittsburgh. I then found out that Ruth, who my grandmother had said died of cancer, and that's what started the whole, like, who's my father kind of trauma, did not die of cancer. I found a newspaper article. I think she was diagnosed with cancer, checked herself into the Kirkwood Hotel, and swallowed a bottle of mercury tablets, which is not a pretty thing. She lingered for 5 days in the hospital, which for the Roman Catholic family probably was a pseudo blessing because it meant she could confess and die in grace. Yeah, so my grandmother's mother committed suicide. Dr. Lang, who everybody was told died before my mother and her brother and sister were born, died after they were born, and they were all listed in the obituary. So again, that was the state of the thing, and hey, I found out some more. So then I started digging into the shared ancestry hints. Again, DNA says that I am descended from Patrick, and Thomas is descended from Patrick, so this Thomas and this family that I found descended from Patrick is my blood. When you start comparing the DNA, they let you see other people's public trees, and it confused me because Thomas on everybody's family tree is married to someone named Ella, or is married to someone named Ellen, or is married to Ruth. People do accept things, and like I said, it is a common name, so I'm thinking, okay, they just messed up. Except no. In 1900, Thomas's family is on Wiley Street. In 1910, Thomas's family is on Idlewild Street. In 1903, in April, I found in Pennsylvania marriage certificate between Thomas from Idlewild Street marrying an Ella, also from Wiley Street, which is interesting to say the least. That marriage takes place in April, and in July they have a son. Yeah, Thomas was married before he married Ruth in West Virginia. And this woman had a son, like, this would be my guess of why they got married. In 1906, Thomas and Ella have a daughter. The son and the daughter are the ones showing up on the family tree of the people who are related to me through Patrick. Which means that this Thomas and Ella, this Thomas is the same Thomas as this Thomas down here. And I can't find any evidence that he ever divorced Ella. So I think I found bigamy, and I think I found the reason why no one would tell my grandmother what was going on. It gets really interesting. Let me put this in the right order. In 1900, the Whalen family is on Wiley Street. They must move to Idlewild Street, and in 1903, Thomas marries Ella. In 1906, he has a daughter with her. In 1910, Thomas is listed as Idlewild. He's just living in the house with his family the same way he was in 1900. Ella, meanwhile, is listed as married, but she's not living with Thomas, her husband. She's living with her father and her children. In 1911, he marries Ruth in West Virginia, probably because he couldn't do it in Pittsburgh. In 1917, Kay's born. In 1918, he's listing Ruth as his wife on the draft card to the U.S. military. And in 1920, an interesting thing happened, if you'll remember. He's on the census with the rest of the family, and he's on the census with Ruth and Kay. Ella is still living with her father and the two kids, but she's now listed as widowed. In 1930, when Kay and Ruth were living with Dr. John, Thomas is living with his sister and brother-in-law, and Ella is now living without her father, because I think her father passed away, unfortunately. She's now head of the house with two kids, and she's listed as married again. So, yeah, this is a soap opera. I haven't reached out to any of Ella's descendants that I've been matched to on Ancestry DNA, just given that my grandmother was really, like, traumatized by whatever this full story is. I'm gonna let it go, or at least I am for now, until I get a better handle on who they are and how exactly they are related to Ella. Yeah, that's the soap opera.